Welcome into another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene podcast. I am Scott Puryear. As always, appreciate you tuning in to the podcast. We talk sports with local people, hopefully get timely guests, and our guest now could be no more timely because we're right in the middle of Missouri State Bears football season. And joining us today is Corey Riggs, the Director of Broadcasting, newly named Director of Broadcasting for Missouri State Sports Properties. Corey, thanks for taking time to join me.
Thanks for the invite, Scott. I'm an avid listener, so I'm happy to be on here with you.
Well, I appreciate that, and that makes one that I know, so that's good. We're up to one, but no. I mean, you and I go way back, and I guess I was thinking on the drive over here today about my 3.5, 4 years at Mediacom when basically I started work at 8 o'clock, but by the time I got to doing regular work stuff, it'd probably be closer to 9. Because you and I and TJ and occasionally Terry Hall would sit there and talk sports for about 30 minutes at least, right?
That is by far the thing that I missed most about moving over after 26 years at Mediacom and all the cable predecessors is kind of that early morning confab and sports roundtable before I got my day started with you guys, and then I would progress back toward my side of the building and do something similar with Brian Bushorn. And I say that was a definitely fun way to start the day.
Now, has it been weird this month? Did you just maybe doze off and drive over to Mediacom by accident, or not going over there in the mornings? How's that been for you?
I have not accidentally ended up in the Mediacom lot as of yet, but I've only been gone about 3 weeks, and I bet I've been in the building once a week for each of the 3 weeks, mostly working on Springfield Area Sports Hall of Fame videos with Gerald and Ryan and the crew there at MC22. And then the other day, I went over there to try and find out what my new cable bill was going to be now that I'm no longer an employee, and that there is not enough time in your podcast to get into that. So.
I think you should get an honorary free cable subscription for life after a certain period. I mean, can we get Art on here and talk about that maybe, or Terry or somebody, see if we can get that done. But of course, the announcement was made about 2-3 weeks ago that you were taking the Director of Broadcasting position at Missouri State. Those who say, who is Corey Riggs? Well, Corey Riggs spent, more than 2 decades behind the scenes in the Mediacom truck delivering Missouri State football games, high school games of the week, a little bit of everything. Moved behind the mic, here in the last few years, and then now has been calling Missouri State football and some basketball and baseball and everything else. Filling in for the legendary Art Hains when Art was felled with West Nile virus back in the fall of 2022. That pretty much summarizes your path to this current position, does it not?
Yeah, that encapsulates it pretty well. Ironically, one of the first broadcasts I ever did was my first TV opportunity was with Rob Evans on Hillcrest boys basketball. As a part of a Mediacom show. And my other first foray into broadcasting was as a student broadcaster in the 98-99 season of Missouri State basketball, then SMS basketball. And I got to work with a couple of fellow students calling the Bears games at Arch Madness. And everybody remembers what Steve Alford and the Bears went on to do from there. So, yeah, I've kind of been around the program as a student, going all the way back to the 90s up until now, and spent the last 11 years as a part of the Missouri State Radio Network family. And it's been an incredible run, and it's just the best job in the world. I mean, Art would be the first one to tell you that being able to go out and do what we get to do and is just a blessing, and I'm really looking forward to Saturday night going under the lights here at Plaster Stadium and joining the voice of the Bears for the home opener.
When Art became sick, and we, there were several people. I stepped in Monday nights with Wyatt Wheeler on Sports Talk, and you filled in at least a couple nights there during that period. Oh, yeah. And then you started doing the Missouri State games to help out there. What triggered that? Is that what really triggered the desire, I guess, on your part to do the announcing more and maybe make it a full-time thing? Because I know you've done stuff for MSU for years in that regard on TV and other venues as well.
Sure. Did the state championships for MSU on Fox Sports Midwest and on their streaming service for over 12 years. Had a 5-year run at Lucas Oil Speedway working with MAV TV on their television broadcast of dirt track racing. But it was probably when Art first asked me about doing the studio shows as a part of the Missouri State Radio Network, where it started to become a thing where it was like, okay, I enjoy the radio, and it's a different medium. It's a much more descriptive medium, which I felt like my style lent itself towards, maybe more so than television. And just those few opportunities well before Art ever got sick to fill in for him during what we call crossover season. Because, Scott, the football season bleeds into the start of the basketball season. The basketball season bleeds into the start of college baseball season. So as good as Art is, and he is the best, he can't be in two places at once. And I started to get some opportunities there doing, say, a basketball game here or there while he was wrapping up football, and doing, say, a month's worth of baseball while he was wrapping up basketball. And from that moment on, I was definitely bit with the bug.
Just an amazing story, a heartwarming comeback with Art and getting back to be able to do games, and do things like the Chiefs. Probably no more beloved guy out there in sports in the Ozarks. I know that there's situations now. You do the football on the road, play-by-play with a couple former Bears, kind of handling the color commentary duties there. At football this fall, you're going to do color for the home football games, and Art's going to do play-by-play, correct?
Yeah, that's the plan. Just like we did last year, would be for Art to still handle all the play-by-play duties at home, and I'll just slide over a spot. And honestly, I've told people from the jump here on taking the director of broadcasting job that the biggest thing for me, I feel like my job number one is just making sure that Art has the best experience he can and the best games that he can as he goes through his final year in this role as the voice of the Bears, and make sure that he's comfortable and has everything that he needs. But I'll handle the play-by-play duties on the road for everything else, and then he'll handle the play-by-play duties at home. And, hey, the first couple of games of the season, this has been a blast to get to work with Sam Block and Clay Harbor on back-to-back weeks. These guys, Sam's never done any broadcasting of any kind, and he came off as a natural. And then, of course, everybody knows Clay Harbor. Clay's a media guy, but really didn't do much radio before this past Saturday up at Ball State, and he did a great job. So very lucky to get to work with such an incredible team, those two former Bears, and then, of course, Art.
And Clay, was a frequent guest of Ned and mine on the Sports Reporter show, too. Does a great job, very knowledgeable, very very excellent delivery as well. So that's a good get for Missouri State. And I understand the plan is Art's last game in football will be when his alma mater comes to town next fall, correct? When SMU's here for the FBS level game?
Absolutely. When he first started kicking the idea around that this might be the end of the run for him, and there's a lot of things that factor into it, his health. He was very honest with me in talking about he didn't know if he wanted to learn another conference. He made it very clear. He's like, I'm a Valley guy, Corey. I'm a Valley guy. I don't know that I want to learn about Las Cruces, New Mexico, and go deal with the Blue Hens in Delaware, and it makes sense. But for him to be able to keep doing them for another year, and then to have almost a storybook ending with his adopted school and his alma mater. I mean, he told me, he goes, I've been waiting 40 plus years for this game. So it just seems like a perfect final chapter to an incredible story.
Absolutely, and of course these football Bears off to an 0-2 start. If you followed who they were playing and the history of things, not unexpected. I mean, that's a tough place to go play at Montana and then Ball State, an FBS member, and try to go get a win on the road. But what are your thoughts after 2 games out there for Ryan Beard's team? And I'll just tell you, I mean, the Montana game in particular, I was impressed how they battled in a tough environment, and they did the same thing the next week at Ball State.
Well, Scott, I'll tell you that in the time that I've been filling in for Art for the last couple of seasons, the Montana atmosphere was by far the best football atmosphere I have been a part of on a Missouri State broadcast. Not only were they loud, they were intelligent and loud. They knew when to ramp it up on 3rd downs, 4th downs. They knew when to chill it out and let their offense do their thing. Not to mention the fact that they have like an air raid siren and the place empties out at halftime. They blow that siren with like 3 minutes left in halftime, and I'm telling you, every single one of those fans came back in. After going out into the parking lot, they all came back in. Nobody headed home early. Ball State was nothing like that. Ball State was a half-empty stadium at best, but, you know, I've heard a lot of people seem really disappointed in the Ball State game, maybe even more so than the Montana game, because they thought that was a game we should win, and I don't disagree with them. The Bears definitely had the talent, had the team to win. I try to remind people, too, that's the level we're going to in a year. Mm-hmm. That means they have 22 more scholarships than the Bears have right now. And honestly, I thought the big difference in that game was our defense had to spend so much time on the field in the first half. I believe they were on the field 22 of the 30 minutes in the first 2 quarters.
Wow.
But the offense was only on the field 8 minutes. They were gassed in the second half, and I think that's what led to those 48 points combined in the fourth quarter between the Cardinals and the Bears.
When you look at this Bears team compared to last year's team, what do you see? I mean, is it a better team and a team that's taken a step toward that FBS jump?
I think it is. I think the timing of the offensive line injuries are horrible. I think if the offensive line was intact for both of these games, there's no way that they're not at least 1-1. If you've got all 5 starters in there, not that the backups aren't doing a great job, they are, but there's a reason why you've got a starting 5, and those guys have been beaten up and banged up from the moment the season started. I think the defense, Scott, has vastly improved. I think Todrick McGee is an all-American level talent. He has had back-to-back games with double-digit tackles. He just set a career high with 16 tackles in the close loss on the road at Ball State. I think the linebacking core is next level this year, because every coach that I listen to scouting Missouri State raves about Taj Chambers and says they have to be ready for him. And the depth at defensive line is probably the best it's been in a couple years. And I think everybody knows what they have on offense. It's just a matter of getting into a little bit of a rhythm. Jacob Clark, when he got injured last year in the first half of Week 4's game at Southern Illinois, he was on pace to probably rewrite the Missouri State quarterback record book. But it's been that many games, that many weeks since he's played competitive football. So he's got a couple of games under his belt. I expect him to maybe put up some eye-popping numbers Saturday night.
Of course, the opener coming up Saturday, as you mentioned, 6 o'clock kickoff over at Plaster. Been impressive the way they've turned that into an event. You know, the Tailgate Village is phenomenal. I like that idea of the air siren to get people to come back in. I think maybe early on Missouri State might use tasers or something to tase the students back in.
Prods.
Yeah, but, I mean, you look at the scores, and these Bears are putting up points. They're keeping the games close and entertaining. What do we expect out of Lindenwood coming in on Saturday?
Well, it's hard to know exactly what you're going to get from Lindenwood. I'll tell you what Coach Ryan Beard has shared with me, and they've got a head coach, 8-9 years in, offensive and defensive coordinators that have been with him the entire time. So that means consistency. That means a scheme that everybody's used to. But they've kind of had a start to their season where they started their season the way the Bears did a year ago. It's like go out to Kansas and see what happens. And unfortunately, for those people that don't already know it, in the last couple of years, Kansas figured out how to play football.
Yeah.
I didn't think that would happen in my lifetime. But they're not just a basketball school anymore. They beat up on Lindenwood pretty good, 48-3. I think the better barometer is their Week 2 matchup. They took on a nationally ranked FCS opponent in Central Arkansas. That game was 34-13. So I think this is a team that Missouri State is going to respect, that Missouri State is going to have to prepare for, but at the same time, I think fully expects to go out and put up their first W of the year in their home opener, just the way they did in year one under Ryan Beard last year when Utah Tech came to town.
How will this setup change for basketball? Explain. I mean, will you do road games? What's the current status?
No, there's no difference than it's been in the last couple of years. I'll go on the road and for the majority of the games be joined by Mike Keltner. I absolutely adore working with Mike. He has forgotten more about basketball than I will probably ever know. He's a brilliant partner and a great guy to be on the road with because, as you well know, Scott, he has got every food stop mapped out, especially in the Valley. So he knows all the best places to stop. I never would have known about the Hickory Log had it not been for Coach Keltner. But, yeah, it'll be Mike and I, Coach and I will go on the road, and then Art and Coach will do the home games, and I'll probably spend a lot of those nights courtside with those guys, kind of engineering the show for them and just making sure that they don't have to worry about any of the technical side of the broadcast.
You know, interesting thing you're doing now with, doing color at home and play-by-play on the road. A lot of people don't know the difference, and there is a big difference. Talk about how you have to shift your style and your approach from one week to another when you're doing those two roles.
Well, it's for the most part, it's just relative to football. And it's not hard for me because that's how I first got into the business. I mean, if you look at somebody and say, hey, if you're a 20-something guy recently graduated from SMS, most of us don't get to say, hey, put me on TV and let me run the show. But I got a golden opportunity with the cable company to be able to learn under guys like Rob Evans and Don West and Mike McClure, and those guys were all established play-by-play guys. So my only hope to break into the business was to start by doing color. And in football, it's such a defined role, especially in TV, and it's practically the same in radio, which is the play-by-play announcer handles the activity from the breakup of the huddle to lining up to the play, and then that color analyst role is really to step in there, radio or television, and break down the play after it happens. Why did it work? Why did it fail? Who made an extra, effort to make the play successful? Or just to even call into question why you would throw a screen pass on 3rd and 29. And that's kind of the role, and it's the one that I started in, so it's one that I have a lot of comfort with.
Take us back to when this all started and how the sports media bug bit you, because I know you're a Webb City grad, correct? What year is that?
Yep, 93.
93. I believe they've dropped football this week after the thumping Nixa put on them on their home field last week. I texted somebody to find out if that's their worst home loss, worst loss period since when, and the guy didn't get back with me. But that's got to be back into maybe the 80s?
Yeah, I would say that there probably hasn't been a lopsided score like that in Cardinal Stadium since pre-Jerry Keel, and Jerry's first year was 1989. It was Tom Cox the season before that for the Cardinals. When I was going to Webb City, I had no intentions of going into broadcasting. I actually moved to Springfield, enrolled at SMS, went here for 2 years, and then went to nursing school. I was on this path where I was going to nursing school, then I was going to be a certified registered nurse anesthetist. I had this plan all mapped out, and then I found out something, and that was I was not mature enough to deal with sick people. They frown on you like yelling at them or telling them to do stuff, and I struggled with that. So I ended up dropping out of nursing school, and it was one of my best friends and my fraternity brothers here on campus that reached out to me and said, well, you're going to go back to school, right? And I said, yeah, but I have no idea what to do. And he goes, well, the rest of us know what you should have been doing the whole time, which is you sit there and talk throughout every game we try to watch in the fraternity house and annoy everybody. Why don't you get paid for that? Why don't you go into like broadcasting or sports or something? And I'm like, well, I don't really have any other options at the moment, so that sounds like a pretty good path to go down. So that was the start of that, and then I fell into a lucky spot where I got to intern under Stan Melton and Tom Mast, two incredible mentors. And after my internship there, the cable company gave me a job, and I stayed there literally 26 years until just in the last month. And it was an incredible run. I mean, that place, that will always be home. My crew and stuff over there will always be family. I've been very lucky to have the run that I have had and getting to be autonomous, Scott. And you know what that's like to be able to kind of pick and choose your topics, pick and choose your games, and have that sort of carte blanche. Most people don't get that in their professional life. So it was a real gift.
Absolutely. And you're talking to the one guy who mastered the art of getting paid to annoy people. I did that for 20 years at the News Leader. I know that feeling. But when you went to MediaCom and went to work with Stan and Tom and those guys, you were behind the scenes. You were in the production truck. You were making sure what people saw on the front end was running smoothly and correctly. And
Yep.
When was the transition the first time to get behind the mic, and what was that like for you?
Oh, that was pretty much me begging from day one. Let me on. I know I can do it. Let me on. I know I can do it. And with so many good guys around, it's like most opportunities. The only reason I got an opportunity was because somebody else couldn't do it one night. And one night it was supposed to be Rob Evans and Don West calling boys basketball at Hillcrest, and that happened to be the night that Don's oldest child, Heather, was born. And so Don had to call and say, I can't make it. We're going to the hospital. We're having a baby. And Dan and Tom looked at me and said, well, Corey, you've been wanting your shot. Here it is. So I sat down with Rob and grabbed a roster, was like, Rob, I'm so excited. This is going to be great. And he goes, okay, easy, kid, easy. Kind of felt like Han Solo and Luke in the Millennium Falcon. He goes, just pick your spots and say something when you've got something important to say. And so we did the first quarter, and I'm not lying to you. I've still got the tape. You can go back. Rob talked the entire first quarter. I never said a word. So we get to the commercial break, and Rob looks at me and goes, hey, kid, we're not going to pay you to just sit here and watch the game. Find a spot, get involved. And so the second quarter starts, Scott, and Rob welcomes us back and kind of teed me up for something. And I started talking as they inbounds the ball to start the second quarter, and I didn't shut up until the horn at halftime. We got to halftime, and Rob goes, okay, kid, somewhere in the middle. Can you help me out here? It's just a little bit of balance here.
There's an art to it.
I think I got it there in the second half a little bit better than the first half.
Yeah, and I haven't watched my son come through the Knicks Alive program, which is just excellent, and what Jordan Burns does down there. And, you get new kids kind of moving into the play-by-play and the color, and you're right, finding that balance. I mean, I've seen guys on local telecasts in the last 25, 30 years that didn't know the balance. I mean, they felt like if they were the color commentator, they had to speak every time the play-by-play guy stopped, and that's not the case. And I mean, it's tough to develop that chemistry, and know when it's time to, especially as the color person, to know when to talk and when not to.
Yeah, it's one of the things I talk about with working with Coach Keltner, that he is so good about kind of reading the room and knowing when he can slide one in and when he just needs to let somebody like Art or me just run with it because the game's maybe up and down the floor. I feel like football is more formulaic because there's a play and then there's downtime. There's a play and there's downtime.
Yeah.
Baseball and basketball are a little bit different, but I feel like football, it's pretty natural, and that's definitely a good way to kind of get your feet wet is in the game that is so balanced with time for the play-by-play and time for the analyst to both kind of share their thoughts.
Well, there's nothing worse than a color guy that thinks he's getting paid by the word. That's when it gets bad. But you've had the opportunity, like we all have, to learn from the best. I mean, when you were doing the studio shows, I mean, you were basically a front row seat for Art Hains and his broadcasts, and kind of talk about what Art has meant in terms of not only career inspiration, but just his story of coming back from what he has, and what kind of effect that's had on you.
Well, I can't even begin to fit into words and what little time we have left. What art has meant to me. Now, you hit the nail on the head a minute ago. I am a creation and an amalgam of a lot of announcers because a lot of people have poured into me over the years. You go back to talking about Dan Melton, Tom Mast, all the guys at MediaCom, Rob Evans, Don West, Mike McClure, the people that I've got to work with since then, the different color analysts I've worked with, guys like Jan Stolly when I've got to do soccer, working with Carly Deer Stubblefield on Lady Bears basketball. But Art has definitely always been one of those that I think everybody in this market has looked up to. He's kind of been the golden rule, the measuring stick, and none of us ever measure up, and none of us will ever measure up. But I know for me, one of the greatest gifts, while he has been battling what he has battled for the last couple of years, has been the ability to broadcast the game and then after that game call him on the bus ride home or something to be like, hey, did you listen? What did you think? What can I work on? And he is so generous with his time and his advice of what I can do to constantly trying to be, a work in progress and be better. He's also the first person that taught me you can't try to sound like anybody. You can't steal anybody's style. It's fake. The listeners will know it. So you've got to go out there and be you, because there's been a lot of nights, Scott, I've thought, well, people have the wristbands, what would Jesus do? I wanted the wristband, what would Art do? But Art was the one that's always taught me, you got to do you, because they will see through it. They will hear it in your voice that you're just pretending to be somebody else, and they won't respect you for it. So that has definitely been something I've worked on and something I've learned from him. And as far as being alongside him, and if you think you love your job or you think you love what you do, I don't think anybody can compare to the passion that Art has for broadcasting Bears games. It would have been so easy for him to just stay at home. I mean, it is a lot of work, as you well know, Scott, to get him up, get him going, get him in the chair, then get him into the van, get him out of the house. And the Herculean amount of effort that he, his wife, their daughter, that everybody, his friends, put into getting him to and from games, coaching shows, and everything else. There is no more dedicated human being that I have ever met in my life than Art Hains.
Well, and just, it makes you realize how lucky we all are now, and I mean, the situation, and he's battled through it with such a positive attitude and just carries on, because that's Art Hains and that's the professional he is. And, I mean, I guess your goal is to be the best Gene Bartow following John Wooden, right? Because you're following a legend, but you got to be you, and you got to do the things that Corey Riggs is going to do.
Yep, and there is definitely some things stylistically that are not going to match up with Art. I tend to be a little bit more over the top, and for some people that's not going to be something that they love to hear all the time. But at the same time, I can't remember who told me, but because it was before my time. But there was a time that it was Vern Hawkins and Art Hains. And now it's been Art Hains and Corey Riggs, and here down the road it'll be Corey Riggs and somebody else. But this run of 45 years for Art, and the pleasure that I've had of being a part of the last 11 of it, that will be the golden era, and there is no doubt about that.
Well, and I guess, when you look at the big picture of it, if there was ever time for a change, it's now, because Missouri State Athletics looks nothing like it did. I mean, new athletic director and Patrick Ramsdell, and I saw that Keith Gutton's been hired by the baseball program, so,
He
and
stayed retired for a long time.
exactly. Yeah.
But with 3-4 months.
Yeah. And of course he won't have to bark out instructions. He just gets to go raise money and do special events and stuff. So it's a good fit for Keith with all the people he knows. But, Conzo Martin back in basketball, Joey Hawkins starting the baseball era. New president.
President.
Yeah. Yep. Does it just feel like a different Missouri State now when you kind of pop over there?
Well, the funny thing about it is it all still looks the same, but there is definitely a vibe that things are changing. Mm-hmm. When you think about having a new president, having a new athletic director, having new coaches in kind of your marquee sports. Ryan Beard's only in his second year. Beth Cunningham's only in her third year. Conzo's back for a second stint. Joey takes over at baseball. Dave Collins, the swimming and diving coach, is one of the longest tenured coaches over here now.
Yeah.
And Dave's one of my favorites. But with all of those changes and the announcement to the move to Conference USA and to FBS football, it is going to be a completely different Missouri State with completely different people having their hands on the wheel. And I am excited to see the direction we go in. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, very good. Well, we're excited to hear you on the mic and Bears football. Like I said, Ryan Beard's kind of breathe some life into that and go out and fight their butts off every time they play and hopefully put on a good show at home this week and get to listen to you and the legend call the thing on the radio there. So, Corey, hey, appreciate your time. Best of luck to you and looking forward to what the future brings you over there with the Bears.
Thank you, Scott. Anytime, man. I appreciate being on with you.
Thank you. That's going to do it for another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. Special thanks to Corey Riggs, our guest today, talking all things Missouri State athletics and his new role as the Director of Broadcasting, and going to hear a lot from Corey in the years to come. Also, big thanks to our sponsor, Fast Break Sports, your one and only stop in the Ozarks for all things sports cards, collectibles, memorabilia. They've got it at Fast Break Sports. Go see the guys. Dress up that man cave now that we're in the football season. Get that thing looking sharp. We'll see you next week on Around the Ozarks Sports Scene.